Whoopi Goldberg never saw this coming. 1 minute she was running the conversation on The View confident, untouchable and used to getting the last word. The next she was completely exposed on live television, and it was Karoline Leavitt who did it. What started as a heated exchange quickly spiraled out of control. Karoline didn't just push back. She pulled back the curtain on everything Whoopi had been saying for years, and within minutes the entire internet exploded. Clips of the moment spread like wildfire. Social media was flooded with reactions, and Whoopi, one of the most outspoken figures on The View, was suddenly the one on defense. But things were about to get even worse for her, because after days of silence, Whoopi finally broke down and begged for forgiveness. She thought an apology would fix everything, but it was too late. The second the broadcast ended, it was clear this wasn't just another View controversy. Whoopi Goldberg had been completely exposed in front of a live audience, and the reaction was immediate. Within hours, ABC executives were already fielding calls from furious viewers, sponsors, and media insiders demanding to know how they were going to handle the situation. The network had seen backlash before, but nothing like this. Viewers flooded social media calling for consequences. Some fans of The View felt betrayed. Others, who had watched Whoopi dominate conservative guests for years, were now questioning everything. And the biggest problem, even The View's own audience wasn't backing Whoopi this time. Petitions started circulating online demanding Whoopi be held accountable. Sponsors started making calls, worried that their brands would now be tied to a spiraling controversy. ABC's internal emails leaked, showing panic behind the scenes, but inside The View the tension was even worse. Sources revealed that the other co-hosts were furious, not at Karoline Leavitt but at Whoopi for losing control of the show. Joy Behar reportedly refused to comment. When asked about the situation, Sunny Hostin looked visibly uncomfortable. When cameras cut to her, producers scrambled to figure out a damage control strategy, but it was already too late. By the next morning, the entire mainstream media had picked up the story, and for Whoopi Goldberg things were only getting worse. Whoopi Goldberg had spent years dominating The View, controlling conversations, shutting down conservative guests, and always having the last word. But now the script had completely flipped, and she was the one under fire. The internet was merciless. By the time the episode had finished airing, clips of the tense exchange between Whoopi and Karoline Leavitt had already been clipped, reposted, and dissected across every major social media platform. Hashtag Whoopi exposed started trending on Twitter. Conservative and even some moderate viewers slammed Whoopi for losing her composure on air. Memes flooded the internet. Side by side clips of Whoopi confidently attacking conservatives versus her completely shaken and defensive reaction to Karoline. It was the first time in years that Whoopi had no control over the conversation, and the backlash wasn't just from conservatives. Hollywood insiders began quietly distancing themselves, not wanting to be caught in the storm. Former fans of The View admitted they were disappointed in Whoopi's lack of professionalism. Celebrity commentators avoided defending her, signaling that even her allies knew this wasn't a fight they could win. Major news outlets had no choice but to cover the growing controversy. Fox News ran segments on it all day, analyzing the moment as a major turning point in how the media treats conservative voices. The Daily Wire posted reaction videos calling it the takedown nobody saw coming. Even CNN and MSNBC networks that typically avoided airing conservative wins couldn't ignore it. And then came the real panic. ABC's ratings for The View began to slip. Executives at ABC were reportedly furious, scrambling to figure out how to control the damage before sponsors started pulling ads. Whoopi had two options: apologize and hope the backlash died down, or double down and risk everything. She made her decision, and it would change everything. Whoopi Goldberg had faced controversy before. She had weathered media storms, defended herself against critics, and always found a way to move forward. But this time was different. The backlash wasn't just coming from conservatives, it was coming from everywhere. Her own audience was turning against her. Social media was relentless, and ABC executives were furious over the damage her meltdown had done to The View's reputation. The pressure was unbearable, and so for the first time in years, Whoopi Goldberg was forced to apologize. The next episode of The View opened with a very different tone. W, who was normally confident, defiant, and in control, now looked visibly shaken. Her voice was quieter, her posture tense, and as the cameras rolled, she took a deep breath before addressing the controversy. I just want to take a moment to address what happened yesterday. I let my emotions get the best of me, and I didn't handle the conversation the way I should have. For the first time in a long time, Whoopi wasn't attacking, she was defending. I respect different perspectives even when I don't agree with them, and I should have handled things differently. I apologize to our viewers and to Karoline Leavitt. It was a stunning moment. Whoopi Goldberg, one of the most unapologetic figures on television, was now begging for forgiveness, but the problem, nobody was buying it. Conservatives saw it as too little, too late. Loyal viewers of The View felt betrayed, realizing Whoopi had lost control. Even some of her co-hosts looked uncomfortable, as if they knew this apology wouldn't be enough. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt, she didn't even need to respond, because by now the damage had already been done. The apology wasn't about taking responsibility, it was about saving Whoopi's career, but it was too late, and things were about to get even worse. Whoopi Goldberg had hoped her carefully worded apology would put the fire out. Instead, it poured gasoline on the flames. The moment the episode aired, the backlash intensified. Viewers weren't fooled. The comments flooded in immediately on social media, in news articles, even in The View's official posts. This isn't an apology, it's damage control. Whoopi didn't regret what she said, she regretted the backlash too late. The moment she walked off, she lost all credibility. The biggest problem, even her own audience wasn't convinced. Fans of The View admitted that Whoopi's usual confidence was gone some long time. Viewers said the show no longer felt that. Others accused Whoopi of giving into conservative pressure, something she had always claimed she would never do. And then came the ratings drop. ABC executives were panicking as overnight numbers showed a sharp decline in viewership. YouTube clips of The View were getting ratioed with dislikes outpacing likes. The comment section was brutal, with people calling for Whoopi to be removed from the show entirely. Sponsors started to get nervous, with a few quietly pausing ad placements. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt remained silent, and that silence was even louder than Whoopi's apology. She didn't need to respond, she had already won the debate. She had exposed the hypocrisy, and Whoopi, she was stuck in a free fall with no way out. But things were about to get even worse, because now the network had to make a decision. If Whoopi Goldberg thought the apology would quiet the storm, she was dead wrong, because the internet wasn't buying it, and they weren't letting it go. Within minutes, reaction videos flooded social media. Conservative commentators picked apart her apology, calling it scripted and insincere. Left-wing voices were conflicted. Some tried to defend her, while others questioned her leadership on The View. Even some of her Hollywood peers stayed silent, a sign that Whoopi's usual allies were distancing themselves. And then came the real panic, the ratings. ABC executives were alarmed as overnight data revealed a massive drop in the audience. Live viewership took a nose dive. YouTube engagement tanked. Clips from the show were flooded with dislikes and brutal comments. Some of the biggest reactions. She spent years attacking people for their views, and now she expects forgiveness. No thanks. This wasn't an apology, this was a desperate attempt to save her career. She made her bed, now she has to lie in it. And just when Whoopi thought it couldn't get worse, reports surfaced that network Executives were considering making a change. ABC insiders leaked details about a closed-door meeting where the network discussed Whoopi's future on the show. Would they quietly sideline her for a few weeks? Would they force her to issue another apology, or would they finally decide that Whoopi Goldberg had become too much of a liability for the first time in years? Whoopi's career was on the line, and the network, they were running out of options, while The View was in full-blown crisis mode, and Whoopi Goldberg's reputation was hanging by a thread. Karoline Leavitt had remained completely silent. She didn't need to respond immediately. She had already won the exchange, and the internet was doing the work for her. But when she finally did speak, it was devastating. Karoline didn't hold a press conference. She didn't go on a lengthy rant. Instead, she kept it short, sharp, and brutal. She took to social media and simply posted, "Actions speak louder than words." Whoopi's apology proves one thing: she never expected to be held accountable. That single sentence set the internet on fire. Millions of likes and shares flooded in. Conservative influencers praised her for standing firm. Even moderates admitted Whoopi had been exposed. And then Karoline dropped the hammer in an exclusive interview with a major news outlet. She was asked about Whoopi's apology. Her response: "I don't need an apology from Whoopi Goldberg. I need accountability, and the American people do too." Boom. She wasn't playing Whoopi's game. She wasn't forgiving her. She wasn't falling into the trap of back and forth drama. She was standing firm, and that's what made it even more powerful. While Whoopi scrambled to save face, Karoline was moving forward completely unfazed. And for ABC, that was a nightmare, because if Karoline wasn't backing down, then the controversy wasn't going away, and Whoopi, her career was hanging by a thread. Inside ABC's corporate offices, the mood had shifted from damage control to full-blown crisis management. The controversy surrounding Whoopi Goldberg wasn't fading away, it was getting worse. By the hour, viewers weren't just upset, they were outraged. Social media was still ablaze with calls for Whoopi to be removed from The View and the networks. Top executives couldn't ignore the numbers any longer. Ratings for The View had taken a nosedive, hitting some of their lowest numbers in years. Audience engagement had collapsed, with thousands of former viewers announcing they were done with the show. Sponsors had started making calls, quietly expressing concerns about being associated with the growing backlash. ABC had dealt with scandals before, but this was different. This wasn't just a PR problem, this was a financial liability. And if there was one thing ABC's executives couldn't afford, it was an ongoing crisis that cost them money. Behind closed doors, the discussions were tense. Some network executives believed they could ride out the storm, assuming the controversy would die down. After all, Whoopi had survived scandals before, but others weren't so sure. This wasn't a one-day news cycle. It had become a national discussion. Major news outlets had picked it up, dissecting Whoopi's words and ABC's response. Even some liberal-leaning commentators were saying Whoopi had gone too far. The network had only two real options: one, force Whoopi to issue another stronger apology, one that felt sincere, took accountability, and might salvage her reputation; two, suspend or fire Whoopi Goldberg to send a message and stop the bleeding. Neither choice was ideal, and ABC's top brass knew it. If they let Whoopi stay, they risked losing viewers and advertisers permanently. If they fired her, they risked backlash from her longtime supporters and Hollywood elites. For years, Whoopi Goldberg had been the face of The View. She had been through countless controversies, and each time she had managed to walk away unscathed. But this time was different, because now Whoopi wasn't in control of the narrative. Karoline Leavitt had spoken once, and that single response had shifted the entire conversation. The story was no longer about Whoopi remarks. It was about whether ABC had the guts to hold her accountable, and as the crisis deepened, one thing became painfully clear to the network's top executives: if they didn't act soon, this controversy wouldn't just destroy Whoopi's career, it could take The View down with her. As the backlash continued to spiral, Whoopi Goldberg found herself in the most precarious position of her entire career. For decades she had been one of Hollywood's most outspoken voices, fearless in her opinions, unafraid to push the envelope, and confident that no controversy could truly touch her. But now the tide had shifted. Now she wasn't just facing criticism, she was facing the very real possibility that her career could be over. Inside ABC's headquarters, the crisis meetings had only intensified. Network executives were scrambling, desperately searching for a way to contain the firestorm, but no solution seemed good enough. If they kept Whoopi on the show, they risked alienating their audience. Even further, if they suspended her, it would seem like an admission of guilt, one that might only fuel the controversy. If they fired her, they would be setting a precedent that even their most high-profile stars weren't untouchable. And Whoopi, she was feeling the weight of it all for the first time in her career. Her future wasn't in her own hands. She had always believed that she was bigger than The View, that she was the one keeping the show afloat. But now, for the first time, it seemed like the show might just move on without her. Even her closest allies in the media were keeping their distance. Liberal news outlets, which had always defended her in the past, were hesitating to take a firm stance. Celebrities who had once supported her were suddenly quiet, unwilling to associate themselves with the controversy. Her co-hosts on The View, the women she had worked alongside for years, were walking a fine line, trying not to get caught in the fallout. And the worst part, the audience wasn't buying her apology. Every attempt at damage control had only made things worse. Her initial response had been defensive, and it had only fueled the outrage. Her public apology had felt forced, and the backlash had only grown stronger. And now she was completely out of moves. Behind closed doors, she was furious. She believed ABC wasn't defending her enough. She blamed her co-host for not speaking out in her favor. She was convinced that the outrage would eventually fade, but it wasn't. An ABC, they were running out of time to make a decision. The network had already seen the warning signs. Sponsors were quietly reconsidering their contracts. Advertisers were getting nervous about associating with the show. Executives knew they had to act fast before things spiraled even further out of control. For the first time in years, Whoopi Goldberg's career was no longer untouchable, and with each passing day, the question loomed larger. Would ABC finally cut ties and move on? Or would they make the mistake of keeping her only to watch The View crumble even further? The fallout from Whoopi Goldberg's meltdown wasn't just another media controversy, it was a cultural shift, a moment that exposed something much bigger than just The View's latest drama. For years, Whoopi had positioned herself as one of the loudest, most untouchable voice in daytime television. She had built a career on her unapologetic opinions, using her platform to call out, criticize, and even silence those who dared to challenge her worldview. But this time the tables had turned. This time Whoopi wasn't the one controlling the narrative. She was at the center of a controversy that she couldn't talk her way out of. The moment Karoline Leavitt exposed her, the floodgates opened. Millions of viewers saw in real time how The View operated. The blatant bias, the dismissiveness, the arrogance, it was all laid bare. And for once, Whoopi Goldberg wasn't able to talk over the moment or brush it off. The impact was immediate. ABC was in crisis mode, scrambling to figure out how to handle the backlash. Viewers were tuning out in droves, furious at how Karoline had been treated. Conservatives who had long criticized the show now had definitive proof that it was nothing more than a liberal echo chamber. Even some moderates and liberals were questioning whether The View had gone too far. And then there was Whoopi herself. For the first time in decades, her career wasn't guaranteed anymore. She had always assumed that no controversy could ever truly hurt her, that no matter What she said, ABC would always protect her and her audience would always forgive her, but this time was different. This time people weren't forgetting. This time the outrage wasn't dying down. This time there were real consequences. And for the first time, Whoopi Goldberg was facing the possibility that her time on The View might be coming to an end. But this wasn't just about Whoopi. This was about something bigger, something that mainstream media had been trying to ignore for years. The American people were waking up. They were tired of being told what to think. They were tired of one-sided narratives being shoved down their throats, and they were no longer afraid to push back. This wasn't just about a bad moment on television. This was a turning point, a moment that sent a message loud and clear. The media doesn't control the truth anymore, and if Whoopi Goldberg of all people could be held accountable, who would be next? The ramifications of this moment extended far beyond the View's studio. It was a warning shot to every mainstream media outlet, every television host, and every journalist who thought they could push a biased agenda without facing the consequences. Corporate network, once able to sweep scandals under the rug, were now realizing that they no longer had the power to control the public's reaction. The truth was no longer something they could filter. It was something that millions of Americans could see for themselves, unedited in real time. ABC executives knew they were in trouble. The outrage wasn't just from conservative circles. Even longtime viewers of The View were voicing their frustration. The idea that The View was a platform for open debate had been shattered. If Whoopi Goldberg could get away with silencing opposing voices, what did that say about the credibility of the show? As the pressure mounted, ABC had a choice to make. Could they afford to keep Whoopi Goldberg knowing that her presence was now actively driving viewers away? Would they risk alienating their audience even further by allowing her to remain unchallenged? Or was it time to finally cut ties and make a public statement that even their biggest stars weren't but accountability? The damage had been done. Whoopi's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. The headlines weren't about her years of experience, her influence in Hollywood, or her past achievements. Instead, they focused on her meltdown, her failed apology, and the growing calls for her removal. And Karoline Leavitt, she didn't need to gloat. She didn't need to press the issue, because the entire world had already seen what happened. She had done something few had ever managed to do. She exposed the media's hypocrisy in real time, and millions of Americans were paying attention. This wasn't just a viral moment, it was a reckoning, and for Whoopi Goldberg it might just be the beginning of the end.